We're talking about the federal transit announcement with MP Marcus Powlowski. It's James with Net News Ledger. Joining us via Zoom is Marcus Powlowski, who is the Member of Parliament for the federal government for Thunder Bay Rainy River. Marcus, welcome.
Thank you, James.
We are still living in what you can only call interesting times. The federal government has been very busy this week. There's been a very positive announcement about transit funding that came through. What would you like to share with us on that?
Yeah, so this is a big deal. It's been something I've been advocating for a long time. The government announcement is $15 billion, I think, over 8 years towards mass transit funding. Our government certainly sees putting money into mass transit as being a desirable thing in that it's an important way of addressing climate change. So it is a direction that we want to go. It's also important for cities in terms of making cities more livable. If you can get downtown and you can get around quicker, putting money into it is also desirable because doing so creates jobs. So it creates jobs in terms of building. And what we're concerned about here in Thunder Bay is building trains, building streetcars. So we wanted to, and we put the money into this. As for its ramifications for Thunder Bay, my understanding of the political situation was that there are three layers of government that were kind of arguing over financing in and around Toronto for mass transit. So obviously the municipality of Toronto, but the provincial government and also the federal government. Now the province and the municipality had made this deal that the province would put more money into the line expansions, like there's an Eglinton line expansion, the Scarborough line expansion, and the province was more eager and decided to allocate money to the line expansion. And in lieu of that, they told the municipality, we will cover a lot more of the cost of the line expansion. You get the state of good repair costs, which includes the new streetcars and or subway cars. So and so then the province was refusing to put the money into the car production. Now, I think this was all being kind of used as the purchase of these vehicles was a kind of a trading chip in the negotiations on funding more globally and specifically funding for the line expansions in Toronto. So the province wanted more money for the line expansions. The federal government had given them some money for the line expansions, but I think this was kind of the holdup in the province refusing to commit to the mass transit vehicle. So I was told that with more money going into mass transit, and that's come out now as of yesterday, that would kind of break the log jam. The province would then be willing to give money towards the state of good repair, and it would all come together in terms of funding for the streetcars and perhaps, I'm not sure, some subway cars. So we're hoping in the days to come that there will be further announcements regarding the streetcars, and I'm not sure about the subway cars, but the streetcars is the one that they already have an order in Toronto, and Toronto's put in its order for streetcars, and the previous contract allowed them to put in for, I think, 80 more streetcars. So that's already kind of, to some extent, a done deal and a lot quicker to move on.
So we've had change here. Alstom has taken over the rail transportation division from Bombardier. So our plant now has new owners. So is that making a difference, or is that causing some little speed bumps on the road?
I don't know. I mean, in a way, and I think Alstom seems like it's in a better financial position than Bombardier was. So there's certainly an upside to being part of Alstom, but certainly a thing we have to consider is I never was particularly an advocate for Bombardier or Alstom. I was an advocate for the local plant in us producing those cars. So, um, in one thing that we have little control over is that in I think the contract for further streetcars, and the municipality announced yesterday that it was going to buy the cars and it would be from Bombardier, now Alstom. And if there's more cars, it'll come from them, the company, but we have no control over where they decide to build those cars. Now, I certainly hope and believe that it will be the factory here, and I think we certainly have the know-how, we have the history. We made most of the streetcars that are there now. We made all the Red Rocket in Toronto, so I'm assuming that's coming to Thunder Bay. I'm hoping that's coming to Thunder Bay, and I will be severely disappointed if it doesn't come to Thunder Bay. But we don't have control over ultimately if Alstom was to say that they were going to ask one of the other plants to build those cars.
And now shifting gears, but staying in the transportation sector, one of the areas that we've been doing a lot of reports on over the past 6-8 months through the COVID has been the impact on the intercommunity bus transportation across Canada. We had Elizabeth May from the Green Party on a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about the need for the federal government to be taking a stronger role in intercommunity bus. What's your thoughts?
I agree. I think it is something that we ought to be doing. My understanding was back in the 80s or something, it was an area of federal jurisdiction, interprovincial busing, but there was an agreement with the provinces that it would move to the provinces. And I guess it worked fairly well up until the time that Greyhound stopped running its buses across Canada, and that kind of created a real gap in the services for many communities. And I think so many people are really potentially dependent on the bus. For example, you're in an abusive relationship in a small town. You have one car or you have no car at all. I mean, how do you leave? How do you get away from it? To be able to get on the bus and get out of a community, I think is an important thing. Furthermore, like if you live in, say, Atikokan, and there's a lot of, I think, fairly affordable houses available in Atikokan, and people in Atikokan want to be able to sell their homes, and would probably be happy to have retired people either coming back to Atikokan or going to Atikokan, because you have your $1 million house in Toronto, and you sell it and you buy a $250,000 house in Atikokan with a gigantic yard, and you've got $750,000 in your pocket. So I think there is, and with COVID, there is this kind of movement perhaps away from cities and into living back again in smaller communities, rural places. And I think as people retire, they may be interested in the more affordable lifestyle of small communities. But there's a big but. If you're living in Atikokan and you want to have to go see the doctor in Thunder Bay, or you want to go into Thunder Bay to do a little more because there's more stores and things in Atikokan, at the moment, I don't think there's, well, maybe Casper is going there, but I think it's really in the best interests of communities for a whole bunch of reasons to have access to the bus. So I know Casper from Casper Bus Lines has been working on a coalition across Canada to kind of get a bunch of smaller companies working together to develop a trans-Canadian partnership. And I think this is a really good idea. I fully support that. I think we need the bus. We need to train too. I mean, I've been pushing to get Via Rail to come back to Thunder Bay too. I don't know if that's going to happen, but
it's always interesting to me. I mean, all the boats on the Great Lakes, that's federal jurisdiction. The trains bringing the grain or taking the transportation of passengers, from, I guess, as close as you can get is Armstrong to Thunder Bay on a Via Rail train. That's federal. Aviation is federal. And under transport they gave the buses to the provinces, and you end up with 9 kingdoms and different rules and different ways to do things. And it makes it confusing. And at the end of the day, if the consumer has a way to get on a bus in the Maritimes and get off the bus in Victoria or Vancouver, that's benefiting all Canadians.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I have 2 of my 3 older grown-up kids refuse to fly, and they live in BC. So, it's a long drive. They don't want to / won't drive. So, the bus or the train's the only way that they can come here, and there's no bus, and then the train only goes through Armstrong, but a lot of older people are in a similar situation. They don't want to or can't fly, and what do? I mean, you should have some alternative. And one of the things we certainly know, being from Thunder Bay, a day like today, is the weather is certainly a big factor, and driving doesn't always seem very attractive either, but a bus or a train is certainly, in my mind, far more attractive. So, and I think you look at what the government does and what the private sector does, and the government is there perhaps when the private sector on its own will or either will not or cannot kind of fill provide a service that the community, the population wants. And I think the people want better access to transportation, given our kind of limited numbers, given the kind of the patchwork state of the bus industry, that I think it is worth the government to provide some assistance in maybe establishing better bus and train connections for Canadians.
Marcus, we'll be in touch with you, and let's keep talking on this issue as we go forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, James.
To keep up to date, you have to subscribe. You have to hit that like button and hit the notification to stay in touch.